Welcome everybody to another episode of the Perceptive podcast series here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Beiser, and for tonight we have another indie game developer interview lined up. And as always, if you'd like me to cover your game or come on and chat about it, definitely feel free to reach out. But my guest has released a kind of FPS with all challenging of quarter shooting and kind of skill shooting as well, inspired by the club and other shooters. And as someone who has played quite a lot of them, I am definitely happy to chat with him about it. So please welcome to the cast from CakeNeq Games, Wyatt White. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing fantastically. 10 out of 10. 7 out of 10. I'm good. That's the point.
It is great to have you on. Thanks again for reaching out, wanting to come on and chat about your game. Again, like I always say, I am always here to chat with indie developers, and talking about an FPS is definitely right up my alley, as I wrote my, not latest book, but one of my later books on game design on FPSs, so I am all kind of like shooter fueled right now.
You're like in there. You're ready to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
But it is, again, great to have you on. So to get things started with, since this is your first time, could you talk a little bit about kind of who you are and what your background is to get started?
Yeah. So my name is Wyatt, as previously said, my name is Wyatt White. I am an indie game developer based in Alaska. I started in 2012. I started making my first game. I was in high school, so I don't even know if that counts. But I started my company, CakeNeq Games, in 2014, and have been running right about a decade. In a couple months, it'll be a decade of making games and stuff. So we focused on small games, of course. We're an indie team. It was just me for the longest time, and then it was me and one other person, and now we have a small team working on our current game, Soul King. So yeah, we've done games in all kinds of different genres. We have the unfortunate motto of making good games. We make games, not money, which is for better and for worse. You know, we've made some interesting stuff. We've made some bad stuff. But yeah, we've kept going. So I lost track of that, but I think it's a good introduction. I have a tendency to ramble. So if you need to cut me off at any point, please do. I will not be offended.
All right. And besides Soul King, you've also released several other games as well. Are they available on Steam, or are they still just exclusive to itch?
Yeah, so we've released 4, including Soul King, we have released 4 games on Steam. Way Down, 3-Step, Provider, and Soul King. We have, I think, 8 or 9 like released games on itch.io as well, including those 4. So there's like 4 or 5 more that were like released, but either before we were doing Steam or we just didn't feel like they would fit on Steam. And then yeah, we have a handful of like prototypes and kind of like things that we're trying to, we're building out, but didn't quite work out or didn't quite, function like we wanted to. So we package them up and distribute them as just like a free, like, if you want to play it, great. If not, like, we're not working on it anymore. So, so yeah. And then we also have a couple mobile games, but we have not committed to the mobile space at this point. So.
All right. And as you were saying, like Soul King is kind of like your latest game. So for the people listening to us, what is the kind of like pitch for it?
Okay, so I have said this so many times. It's going to sound really rehearsed and weird. Soul King is a fast pass. Oh my god. I was bragging about how good I am at saying this, and I immediately messed it up. Soul King is a fast-paced retro FPS about drinking tea, shooting bad guys, and outrunning a wall of death. You play as a character who wakes up in a dreamscape, trapped there, and finds, in many fewer words than we use in the game, finds a community of people who have been trapped by this evil mastermind, the Soul King. And you find you have the unique ability to dive into people's nightmares and basically break them out. So the people trapped in this world are trapped in either a dream or a nightmare of like being happy or being afraid to leave or whatever. You shoot your way through fast-paced levels, chased by a wall of death, to break them out, and eventually use this group of people you've built up as a fighting force against the Soul King himself. So yeah, I think that explains it pretty good. I don't know, maybe. Like I said, I ramble a lot, so just cut me off when I'm going too long.
All right. So, with Soul King, I was like looking on the store page as you were describing it. Is it kind of considered a roguelite? Like, are the levels procedurally generated, or are they kind of fixed maps?
So no. So this is something we actually we've demoed it at a couple of local conventions here, and are actually doing it in a couple of weeks. We're going to be at another convention here with a bunch of other local developers. But yeah, so like we got the question a lot of like, oh, is this a roguelike? Is this a roguelike? It is not. I don't hate roguelikes. I've made one or two. I've played a ton of them. But this is not a roguelike. It is a linear first-person shooter. So like linear and quarter shooter kind of get a bad rap as being like the bad games. You know, like Call of Duty, old Call of Duty, right? It's like, oh, this awful linear corridor shooter. You just press buttons and move on. We are a corridor shooter in that it's about moving forward and shooting more than it's about exploring. Lots of retro shooters have like large, expansive levels where you're like going around and finding keys and stuff. We have some of that, but our main mode of gameplay is like push forward, shoot bad guys, keep moving, keep shooting, get your score up. And then at the end of every level, there's like usually like a 3 to 5 minute map of like slower exploring and reading some story and learning about characters, learning about motivations and stuff like that. So we're not a roguelike. However, we do have a gauntlet mode, something we patched in after release. It's called Grimzo's Gauntlet. It's like a little interstitial add-on between the main game and our DLC that's coming out at the end of the month, at the end of April here, that rearranges levels. So our levels are made out of 5 maps each, and basically what it does is you generate from a seed or you generate from a weekly run, basically, and you generate a level out of pre-existing maps. So it like takes like the first map of level 1 and the fourth map of level 2 and the second map of level 9 and like stitches them into one level, so you can run through, and then it gives you like a unique ending that like is like a time trial kind of thing. So it is not a roguelike, though we do have a roguelike-ish mode, and also are maybe releasing a roguelike spin-off repurposing too. Anyway, sorry. It is not a roguelike, but it does have some roguelike elements to it, you could say. Again, yeah. I'm going to stop pointing out that I can ramble, but I can ramble a lot.
All right. And I do want to talk a little bit more about the kind of gameplay of Soul King in a minute, but one thing I just wanted to ask, it's been a while since I've chatted about kind of like the state of like the game dev scene around the world. As you say, you're based out of Alaska. So what has kind of been like the Alaskan like game dev scene like, or how has it grown like over since you started?
Yeah, it's super weird. We actually have a organization here that existed. Excuse me. We have an organization here that's existed since before I was like, since I was like, in diapers, basically. Yeah. So there a couple of years ago, when I joined, it was very much the game development part of it was very small. It was very much like a couple people got together once or twice a year and like worked on games together. Myself and 1 or 2 other people who were relatively new joined up and kind of like, hey, we want to push this forward. So we do like monthly meetups now. We put on our first Alaska Game Development Expo in January, February, a month or 2 ago. We put on our first expo of like, hey, here are 4 developers working in Alaska, in Anchorage specifically, come together. We showed our games, had people demo them and come through. It was a really cool experience. I wish I had good pictures of it, but we didn't think until the end of it to like, oh, hey, we should take pictures of this thing. And then like, it didn't work out for pictures. But yeah, so we're putting on this year a booth at a local comic convention, what's called Arctic Comic Con. We're putting on a booth with 6 or 8 developers, I think now. I need to actually confirm that. But I think we have 6 or 8 developers now that are going to be at this booth and like showing off their stuff here. It's a very hobbyist focused game scene in Anchorage. There are 1 or 2 like professional freelance developers, but the vast majority of us are either running little companies on the side or on while doing other consulting work, or like just people who like to make games in their free time, kind of doing that as they can. So yeah, I guess to sum it all up, we are in the process right now of trying to build up our a robust infrastructure of local development talent, including stuff like like an expo, monthly meetups, and a game jam we're doing in May. So yeah, it's cool. It's an exciting time. It's exciting to be able to be at not the beginning of something, but to be part of building this kind of scene, and the response from local players at Arctic Comic Con and stuff, and people who come to the expo, and people learning that we're doing people have heard about the jam before I even got to announce it. They were like, "Oh, is a jam happening? That'd be cool. That'd be awesome." So, and it's super cool response locally here at least. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's always really good to hear. I'm for me, I'm still based here on the East Coast of the United States, and it's still been just very slow movement, in New Jersey, Pennsylvania era, and still trying to see some more happen there. But it is very, it's still very hard, I think, for a lot of places kind of start a game dev scene.
Yeah, and especially here, Alaska. So for anyone who doesn't know, we are a tiny state. I believe we are at 750 something thousand people total. So the entire state is I don't know all the stats on what East Coast cities are like, but I believe our state has less people than a good number of cities in New York, New Jersey, our big city. So I live in Anchorage. This is our big city for the state. I think we have 300 or I think we have 300 something thousand people. So or 200 something thousand. I don't know. We have a third of the people in the state live in this city, and it is by any other state's metrics basically insignificant, right? But yeah. So it's weird to be building. We're in a weird spot as far as actually getting talent and finding people, and it's all homegrown stuff. We're not recruiting anybody into this to come here and work in tech, in games, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a fun process though. It's an exciting to build up to see people going from I just installed Godot, I found you guys as a group, let's talk, to now one of the people who just started 2 or 3 years ago is working on releasing their first Steam game, and yeah, it's been a cool process. So yeah.
Yep, really great to hear. So to go back to Soul King and your studio, so what attracted, as I was looking on the store page on Steam, so each one of your games is definitely very different in terms of structure and tone. Yeah. So what attracted you to kind of FPS for Soul King?
Yeah, first on the each of our games is a very different thing. It's a terrible idea. Don't do that. Don't reinvent your workflow and your games every time. It's a bad business decision. It's a great creative decision. I've made games in genres that I don't like, games in genres that I love. FPSs is a game in a genre I love. As I can show here, I'm a big Doom fan. I'm a big I've played I think every Call of Duty. I've played I think every Doom now. I've just every first-person shooter. But yeah, so what attracted me specifically to Soul King and first-person shooters is a weird combination of stuff. I like to say that that Soul King is equal parts Doom, the Club, which is a somewhat obscure Sega third-person shooter from the 360 era. Doom, the Club, Fear 3, and House on the Borderland. So that puts our influences as a retro shooter from the 90s, a unknown third-person shooter from 2008 or 9, a deeply hated first-person shooter from 2011, and a sci-fi novel from 1890 or 1900 something. A very old sci-fi novel. But yeah, so I've been a big retro first-person shooter fan for a long time. When I was a kid, I grew up in I graduated in 2014 from high school. So when I was a kid, the late 2000s, early 2010s, there weren't a lot of great now if you want to play a game for free, you've got Fortnite, you have Fortnite, Roblox. I think PUBG is free now. You have all these great options for free games you can just get in and play. Back then, the only one I was aware of at least was Combat Arms. Everything else costs money. So what you did, if you didn't have any money like me and wanted to play video games, was dig back into like old stuff that you could pirate or find for free, which is how I got to Doom and Strife and Hexen. And I played the absolute shit out of those for years. Not to mention, it was all that could run on my laptop. I remember I got a download of Half-Life Uplink, which I don't know how well known that game is, but it was a demo for Half-Life that was like a bespoke level that kind of like basically boils the whole game down into like a 15-20 minute level. For Half-Life 1. So I played about 1,000 hours of that. Like, it was all these old kind of obscure and forgotten shooters. So that was where I found my deep love of Doom and the Doom era. I never got into build engine games like Duke Nukem and that kind of family of games, but not out of just out of I never found them. So but yeah, so and then as time goes on, I find other things that I like. One thing that I love is the Club, right? Is a score-focused shooter. It's basically like a third-person shooter racing game. So it's lots of like aiming for high scores, hitting headshots, shooting, moving quickly, which is of course in Soul King where the score focus and the focus on combos and the taunting that you can do to like increase your multiplier, over enemies you've defeated. A lot of that came in from that of sort of this idea of like moving players fast. And then I'm just gonna go down the list, I guess. Fear 3. My brother and I got 2 copies of Fear 3 when he like left the house after like he graduated from high school. He's older than me by 2 years, so he graduated in like 2012, 2013. We got 2 copies of Fear 3 because I don't know, it was like a Steam sale or something. But we tried the multiplayer, and for those who haven't played it, when you could get it, I don't think it actually works anymore. I believe there's some weird issue with the servers where they disconnect you after 30 seconds. At least last time I played, there was. But the Fear 3 multiplayer suite is incredible. It has a mode called, we said PG-13 on this, right?
Yeah.
PG-13. Okay, so the mode is called F-word, F-U-C word, run. Like, freaking run. That's the mode. That was the mode name. In which you played through a linear level from the campaign with a wall of death chasing you. It was much slower in that one. That's more of like a Call of Duty cover shooter type of deal than a fast-paced retro FPS like Soul King is. But that like image of the wall of these like faces and stuff chasing you, and like the pressure that puts on a player really stuck with me for a long time. And I've got a couple. It's actually on our itch.io page. We have some old prototypes of like games that I put together with the same conceit of being chased by a wall of death, just with different mechanics. It just didn't really work out. And I thought that was really cool. And then later in life, I read some of William Hope Hodgson's writing, who is the writer of House on the Borderland, and somewhat more famously, The Nightlands, which is like weird, esoteric sci-fi fantasy kind of stuff. He's compared a lot to H.P. Lovecraft, though he's much less focused on monsters and like the unknowableness of the universe and stuff. I mean, it has a lot of that, but it's much more focused on like almost like pulpier, like dudes fighting monsters and like this strange I always compare, when I try to explain it to people, I compare it to like if it was a King James version of a Bible, but it was like a sci-fi novel written in King James English, basically, in that it's incredibly flowery and dense and super slow to read, but super interesting with ideas. And so in House in the Borderlands, there's lots of these like dream projection sequences where this main character is probably losing his mind, but like falls asleep and just gets projected into these strange environments in his dreams. And so like that's something that I took, and like that was the click point that was like, oh, here's how this all fits together. And like so that's why in Soul King, you're trapped in this dreamscape, the Barclay Reserve. It's like it's just a dream hub basically that connects these people together, and that gave us the great excuse to, what level do you want to build next? Do you want to build a farm level? Do you want to build a city level? Do you want to build a snow level? Do you want to build I don't even know. I can't even think. Like a mount up in the mountains, mines and like mine shafts and that kind of thing. Like whatever you want to do, boom. As long as we can make like a cool reason why the character would be dreaming that, or some connection to their psyche, or some connection to like their situation, we can do whatever we want. And so every level is like its own different environment, its different character. Every level, it's give us a lot of free range to write interesting stuff. I think interesting stuff. But yeah, that is another thing I don't recommend. Don't make every level of your game center around a different character. We have done that twice. It balloons your art budget really fast because we have to generate not just like 5 nice portraits or 10 nice portraits. We have to generate like 25 character portraits, and then every time we add a new level, we have to generate more. And like, yeah. That's a side note. That is a scope issue that I have done twice now, and we'll see how many more times I do it before I learn my lesson. But yeah. So anyways, that's how we get there. I've been wanting to do a retro shooter since like I don't know, 2015, 2016. I pitched to the person who I was working with then of doing or 2014 it would have been. I pitched doing like a Doom style thing back then. I should have done it then. I would have been ahead of the curve then. I am now like kind of behind the curve. Retro shooters are not only a thing, but they are a genre unto themselves with their own publishers and their own kind of things. And so
Yep.
I can't help but feel I should have done it back then. I could have really like been ahead of the curve, but I would have designed it worse back then. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. So hopefully that answers the question. I talked for a while there. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So I guess one thing I want to ask you about in terms of kind of like the score base, like the inspirations from the club.
Yeah.
I guess like for me, I had this conversation with another developer who worked on like a shooter. There's always that kind of challenge of making like the score chasing, I think, feel like interesting to someone who's not like a hardcore player. I'm sure you've probably heard of Devil Daggers. And like for me, like I never got into Devil Daggers. I just felt like it was just like it was too like restrictive in terms of exactly how you wanted to play it.
Yes.
So excuse me. So with Soul King, how does like the score chasing work, or like how does someone like build it up, or like what's like kind of like the flow of the game?
Yeah. So in my mind, at least, right? Like, I agree. I hard agree. I don't want to name any names, but I've been playing some. Bless you. I've been playing some other games that are very score centric. That very much like you described. Like they want you to execute the moveset as perfectly as possible. To get the score to continue through the game. And while I can respect that, I dislike that as a thing. Because I feel like, for me at least, gameplay, especially when you're doing a shooter or something like that, where you're first person. Excuse me. Sorry, that was intentional. When you're doing something first person, I feel like a lot of for me at least, I want actions to be a communication of like what your character is. Maybe that's not even the right way to describe it. Like, I want players to be able to express themselves in some way through the gameplay. That's not always going to be the case. Obviously, I can't just let players like pick flowers in a field in a first-person shooter. Like, there are constraints of the design. That's how it works. But something we do differently from many other FPSs, retro FPSs, that is we instead of sort of the 10 weapons you find throughout the game, or you get like. You just have to scrounge up what you have. You pick an inventory going into every level. So like you select a pistol, 2 long guns, and then a tool and a melee weapon. So you get to kind of customize your inventory around what you like. Do you want fast firing weapons? Do you want shotguns? Do you want sniper rifle? Like, what do you want? Something I think we did well with that is every single player that complains about a weapon being broken complains about a different weapon being crazy overpowered, which to me just confirms we did at least a decentish job of balancing weapons, and that we made weapons that click with the kinds of people who pick those weapons. Sorry, looping back to your original point. So like as far as score stuff, we basically in Soul King just accepted that certain players aren't going to care about getting a high score. That's just not how they play. We don't gate anything behind score. If you finish the level, you finish the level. Like you get the credit. When you beat a level, you get a little +1 point. Getting so many points unlocks new weapons and stuff like that as you go. So the reason to get a high score is one, it feels good. It feels good to go fast and shoot stuff. We've gotten the feedback many times that like even in the finale levels in the 4th or the 5th level in a 5th map in a level, players will find themselves going fast and running and trying to like get the kills and like boost that modifier, even though in those levels you're not actually like you don't gain anything by going fast. It's just that it feels good to go fast, and so people like to still go fast. For people who don't want to go fast, that is what the wall is for, right? So our idea is basically to put you as a player can go fast. Here is like the target range, right? Then we have like the good player range, and then we also have the wall as the minimum range, like the minimum speed you have to go, right? You have to outrun this wall. It moves slower than you, especially if you're sprinting, it moves way slower than you, but like as you're getting stuck on enemies, enemies will stop your speed and stuff like that. That is the entire point for our design behind the wall is even players who don't care about getting the high score, don't care about even being in the higher range, now they still have a reason to engage with the mechanics in a way that pushes them forward, that makes them want to keep moving and shooting and kind of like that pushes those players to still maintain the rhythm of the game that we want to convey. And so, yeah. So I guess the simplest way to say it is we didn't really solve the problem of getting players who don't care about score to aim for high scores. We just gave them you have to go at least this fast, right? You have to go at least this speed. And like whether or not you engage with the high scores is up to you. We found that it worked really well, actually, just knowing that there was a wall. Honestly, I think I could have saved myself a lot of trouble by just saying, there's a wall, it's going to get you, and then not putting it in. Because just saying that, especially in live demos, so we're on convention floors and stuff, in live demos, man, I let the people, every time someone gets the controller, I let them like die to the wall once, right? Because they always like start, and they're like, oh, what's going on? They hit the button. Our security gate comes down, the wall starts coming behind them, they hear things coming, and they like turn around and then immediately get killed. And I go, okay, so there's a wall chasing you. Now try again, because it's a really quick reload process. Just knowing that, about half the people who play just immediately sprint forward and ignore all the enemies and like don't shoot at anything, they're just running away from the wall, which is a viable strategy, right? Okay, cool, you want to sprint. The problem is most of those melee enemies will chase you, and the moment you stop sprinting, if you're ignoring all the enemies, the moment you stop sprinting, they're all just gonna bam, 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 and you're toast. So like, there are some things you can sprint through, some things you can't. That's something you learn as playing. But yeah, man, I completely lost track of the question. Score stuff. Yeah, it's a complicated thing. A lot of people really like getting high scores. A lot of people don't. And so the people who don't, we put the wall in to make sure that they are also engaging with the mechanics in a similar way to the way people who like the high scores engage with those mechanics. So yeah.
So with like the score system itself, does like the score change or influence like the actual gameplay? Like does like a high score let you shoot more? Does it let you do more damage? Like does it like interact any way with like the actual core gameplay?
It doesn't. So really, it's the score is intended as a way to push players who want to exceed the minimum, right? To like keep exceeding, and then to show off, I don't know how many direct messages I got from like, hey, I beat your score. Hey, I beat your score. People like the score stuff. It's cool. And I am a fan of it too. But yeah, like, so it doesn't impact, you don't do extra damage, you don't do extra, you don't get extra money, you don't get extra score. You build up a multiplier to get higher, and your score goes bigger, and you kill more enemies to get a higher multiplier, which makes your score go higher, which continually, we have a taunt mechanic, which actually does influence gameplay some. So like when you fight an enemy, a couple enemies, as long as their corpses are still active, there's a little indicator on the screen that allows you to hit a button to taunt, which just has like a little like thumbs up, or like a like a peace sign waving, or like just a haha, and there's a little voice line of like nice, or like whatever. Which does then increase your multiplier by the number of corpses active within a small radius around your character, which is cool because like higher score. Again, people love the score. But also that instantly will kickstart your health regeneration, your stamina regeneration, and just your health and stamina regeneration. They get kickstarted instantly. So like instead of there's usually I think a 3 or 5 second delay between using stamina and then it starting to refill. That just instantly starts to refill that stamina. And then we've got sorry. I'll stop there. I'll start explaining our health system, but that's not part of this question. So yeah. Yeah, and that might be a lazy answer as far as like we don't actually like it doesn't factor directly in. It's almost a separate system that just kind of sits on the side there and allows you to like brag to your friends or upload your Steam score or that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. We like it. Fun.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and people again like the whole score chase genre is all about just how do I get 1/100th of a millisecond at a faster time or 5% more score than someone else, and it has grown again. Like there are people who will obsess over this stuff.
Yep.
So with a Soul King, in terms of like the general gameplay, I guess more in terms of like the shooting this time.
Mm-hmm.
You said earlier, of course, inspired by games like Fear, like Doom. Mm-hmm. What was your approach to the gunplay of building the various weapons?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, I think. So as far as gunplay as like the mechanical balancing of the weapons, or like what's our approach to like making it feel good, or what do you?
Yeah, I would say more like the approach of the weapons, making them feel good, making them feel balanced, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one in that I don't have a good answer for that. Most of it is just vibes-based balancing, right? Like, it was a lot of playtesting, a lot of like me and George, who's the kind of not second in command, but like he's like a big part of the team as well. He does a lot of 3D modeling for us. Would just sit down and like playing through the game A to Z on a controller, playing through the game A to Z on mouse and keyboard. Just looking at like, okay, does this feel right? Does this weapon feel good? If something's fast firing, what I try to do is make sure like if something's fast firing and has a quick reload and like it hits hard, we have to like compromise some part of that. And something that I feel like works well is that it's all dream stuff, so we don't have to think like, okay, well, in real life, this weapon has a 25 round capacity clip, right? Like it fires 9mm, or like it fires 40. Like we don't have to think about any of that. It's blasters, it's lasers, it's pew pew, blam blam, explosions and stuff, right? So like a lot of our weapons have relatively low ammo caps. Pistols have like I want to say like 9 to 12 rounds. Our shotguns have like 4, 6, and 7 round magazines. Like that's it. Our rifles have like 15 to 18 maybe shots, and like submachine guns have like 20, 25, I think maybe 30. But we kept like that kind of thing. Magazines small. Reloading is an important part of the thing, which is another departure from a lot of retro FPSs. We include reloading. Not only include reloading, it is an integral part of the what I call like the dance of combat, right? With like the sort of push and pull of shooting and moving and reloading and using your tools. And part of that dance is the offhand reload, which is something that I am proud of from a design perspective. Essentially, when you've shot rounds out of a weapon, but don't have that weapon out, so you like switch to another. So you shoot like 5 rounds with your pistol, switch to another weapon. Your pistol begins to reload in the background at a speed that is determined by stats in the back end, which allows us to set another differentiation between weapons. So there's a couple weapons that fire. You fire the weapon. If you were to reload it, it takes like 3 seconds to reload, right? But then if you switch out from that, the offhand reload is like 6 seconds, which is a lot. That's quite a while. But there are other weapons that we would have. The in-hand reload is like 5 seconds, like super long. The offhand reload would only be 5.2 seconds, right? So like it gives us another thing to tweak of like, okay, so this is our big gun. We pull this out, we fire 3 shots. and then you want to throw that away because it'll reload faster in the background as you're shooting something else, right? The idea being that, like, if you understand your weapons and you understand the timing, you can basically just constantly be shooting because you know when to switch from one to the other, what situations to switch from one to the other, and how not to waste ammunition, shooting a sniper rifle in a close quarters environment or shooting a shotgun in a long distance environment, right? Like, that's just, that's not going to work out. So yeah, I guess the honest answer is, like, we just felt it out. We just vibes based balancing. We thought, oh, sniper's a little too good here, a little too bad here. Tweak it as needed. And again, like, I feel like we must have been some level of successful in that because, again, like, every single time I've gotten a report of a weapon being OP, it is a different weapon in a different context. And the weapon that I'm like, no, this is the OP weapon. That person's like, no, that weapon is trash. You're terrible with that. Like, what are you talking about? Like, no, I promise. I've done the math. This is the math. This weapon is way more powerful. And they're like, no, it's terrible. The sniper rifle, I honestly, going up to release, it's a sniper rifle. It's just the only gun in the game with a buttstock, so it's a sniper rifle. But I was like, I need to cut this. Like, this gun sucks. It's terrible. It's so bad. One of our first players that, like, really, like, got into it and, like, gave us some good feedback was like, sniper rifle's OP, you need to nerf that immediately. I was like, no, you don't understand, this is the worst gun in the game. But yeah, like, I ended up making some tweaks to that to make it even better, and yeah. But yeah, again, like, I feel like it just ended up meaning that we made weapons that were built for the people who would use them. So rather than trying to balance perfectly, we just, like, if I'm someone who wants a sniper, what do I want out of that sniper? I want it to hit. I want it to, hit exactly where I'm pointing. I want it to reload quickly. I'm fine with, like, a long delay between shots. That's okay. And so, like, we tried to balance around that as much as possible. So yeah.
But I do need to go back. So what if I do want the sniper shotgun or the shotgun sniper? Is that an option in the game?
The shotgun sniper loadout, or, like, the shotgun that shoots forever and the sniper that shoots close quarters. Look, there is no minimum distance, so the shotgun sniper is not exactly the best one. But in the game, like, there's not that many long distance engagements. I mean, we tweak the numbers because, like, it's a game about moving and shooting. There's not a ton of, like, super long sight lines, so, like, bullet fall off is pretty quick. But yeah, like, we've got a lot of people who have made, I've seen some fun, like, I wouldn't call them compilations exactly, but, like, some fun footage of people just, like, blasting through levels with a sniper and a pistol and, like, not even using the third weapon at all. Like, you doing all these close quarters, like, whip shots and stuff with a sniper, when their enemy is, like, this close to them. Like, you didn't need a sniper for that, but some people like it, that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And, like, to your point about, like, someone finding, like, your worst weapon OP, that is, again, like, the joy of very, like, reflex-driven games. Like you said, like, if someone vibes with, like, that perfect weapon, it just fits their style exactly, that's going to be their weapon. Like, for me, when I played Gunfire Reborn, which is kind of like a FPS roguelite, or roguelite, like, there's this, like, rapid-fire shotgun that's just, like, the weapon that I use, like, whenever it shows up.
Yeah.
And it is, like, as you said, like, it's good when you have, like, everyone has, like, their OP weapon, that one that they prefer the most. And it's far better than, trying to force people, saying, oh, you must use this exact weapon for this exact situation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, I guess one thing we haven't talked about yet is, like, enemy design. You've, of course, mentioned a few of them earlier in. But what was kind of, like, the design, or, like, what did you want, like, the roles of the enemies to be in Soul King?
Yeah, so the enemy design is very much, so we have a especially for the length of game that we are, which we sit at about 4 to 6 hours is what I quote. Many of the completion times are closer to, like, 6 to 8 hours, but, like, I do not claim to make a game with 6 to 8 hours of content. Like, but for our length of game, especially for retro shooter, we have a pretty small enemy roster. We have 6 primary enemies, and we're adding 3 more in the DLC, so we will be at 9 total, with 3 bosses. So, like, it's a pretty small cast. But I will almost without shame, maybe a little bit of shame, basically just be like, yeah, it's Halo. Halo's where I pulled it from. Not all Halo, obviously, but our standard configuration is basically we have a scout, which is an armed enemy with 2-shot rifle, and fiends, not fiends, but fiends, who are a melee rushing enemy. So like that is like you pop into a room. Odds are it's going to be 1 or 2 scouts with 2 to 4 fiends in a room. That is like our bread and butter primary composition, if that makes sense. We wanted to do enemies though differently. It's something we pulled from like the club and some more almost like target shooting games. Of enemies are intended less to be a thing to deal damage to you and a thing to like maneuver, or they're less to be like an enemy that's going to fight up, come up against you, and more to be basically like a moving target, right? Like we wanted enemies they go down pretty quickly, usually like 2 to 5 shots depending on what weapon and kind of what enemy. But like you're not going to be unloading 40 rounds into an enemy. That just doesn't happen outside of boss fights. We want the enemies to be sort of a thing you could express your ability to shoot, retarget, and shoot again at. And sort of that's, again, feeds back into the score system of like, the faster you do that, the higher your score goes, that kind of thing. But yeah, so like enemies, you can walk right through an enemy. Like they're not going to stop you from moving through the environment. Specifically because we wanted them to be able to kind of like, you to be able to move through them almost like a I was thinking of Destiny as like this thing I used to do. Destiny 2. I used to be a huge fan of Destiny 2. Not so much anymore. I haven't played like the newer content. I like it when it was bad. I like the bad Destiny 2. If you can't tell, my affection for bad video games. But yeah, like launching into a group of enemies and like instead of it being a cover coming up to shoot and then coming back down, it just being this sort of flowing affair of like stab and then machine gun fire and then shotgun this guy and then stab that guy and then use your ult or your grenade or whatever to like just like eviscerate a group of enemies. Something I wanted to replicate in this, without having verticality as a main part of the game, it changes how you have to design that. But that's something that then we drew a little bit from Doom in there of like being able to kind of move around these enemies. And in Doom, I believe I should know this. Talking about how much I love Doom, and now I don't know 100% if you can walk through enemies or not, but I'm going to say it doesn't matter. But, sort of like orbiting around these enemies, it's a great strategy in Doom 1 and 2 to fight large groups of enemies is kind of the orbit around and firing at them from other angles, or from multiple angles as you go. Replicating that in a smaller situation with targets, essentially. We do have, so after the Fiend and the Scout, there's obviously higher level enemies. There's a Sniper, which the entire point of the Sniper is to make sure that if you're not strafing and moving around, you get hit. They do huge amounts of damage, but they have a big wind-up and a big laser sight that, of course, tracks you. I have a lot of people complain, like, oh, Sniper's OP, Sniper's OP. The only way the sniper will ever hit you is if you've stopped moving. So like if you walk into a room and stand still and you're shooting at enemies, the sniper will target you within a second or two and then shoot you. If you are stepping left or right in any speed at any moment in that process, they're going to take longer or they're going to miss you. So like that's really how I tried to design the enemies, was to push the players into our intended way of playing, right? So like the scouts, they fire 2 shots, but they have a slow, it's a slow projectile. It's coming to the same kind of deal. Like you got to move out of the way, and it's easy to do if you're doing it. If you have stopped and then, oh no, I need to move out of the way, you're probably going to get hit at that point. We have a turret enemy that's just called a turret. It doesn't have any clever name or anything. That, much like the scout, it's got a bigger burst fire than the scout, but it doesn't move because it's a turret. And then like a knight, we call it the soul knight. It's just got a big sword. It's much like the fiend, but it comes towards you quicker and like gives you a hit and then goes away. And it's got a bigger health bar and stuff like that. But yeah, no. In the end, like we wanted enemies that chase you and enemies that shoot at you, and that's what we end up having, really. Like Our snipers are there to get you to move. The fiends are there to to be things to shoot and take out, but also to punish players who try and just sprint through a level. Because at some point you're going to take a shot and it's going to take all your momentum away, and then that line of 9 fiends that were right behind you, as you ran through all the other checkpoints, like just going to all wham you at the same minute, and you'll be dead within a second or two. But yeah. I think that hopefully answers questions. Maybe. I'm not going to mention the rambling thing, but the rambling thing is for sure. So
that's all right. And like to your point, I wanted to touch on about like designing the enemies as targets rather than designing them as an actual threat. That I think is a very important aspect when you're trying to decide what kind of shooter you're wanting to build. Like in a game like Doom Eternal, the enemies have to be very engaging, very active.
Yeah,
they're forcing you as the player to run, jump, shoot, rip, and tear. Same thing goes for something like with Ultra Kill. But if you try to do something like that in like a score-based game, when you're wanting that player, as you say, you want the player to feel like they're like the star of the show. They're the one who's kind of putting the focus on it. It becomes a lot harder to do that when you're trying to get a score, you're trying to do something, and the enemy's just like constantly zipping around or being aggressive like that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's I have made the joke many times of like it's John Wick versus the Resident Evil movies, right? Of like I enjoy both. I'm a huge fan of trash cinema, and I will defend the Resident Evil films, the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movies till I die. They are incredible. I own all of them on Blu-ray. That's not the point. The point is Alice, the main character in those movies, basically moves through every combat encounter with this grace and finesse that is impossible of a normal human. She is above all of the other characters, unless, of course, the specific encounter needs her to like be on equal footing with another, ninja machine gun artist or whatever. But she moves, she shoots. Like the enemies are targets; they are things for her to act on, right? As they are objects in like an almost fundamental sense, right? Like they are things for the actor, the player, or Alice in this situation, to act upon, right? They put up like resistance. They're trying to shoot her, but like they're so far beneath her that like it doesn't even matter, right? She's just playing with them. And we wanted enemies in this to feel in Soul King to feel that way, to feel like you are, that like I am a god of combat, right? I'm just diving into these enemies and like blasting and shooting and shotgun that way and I turn this way and I stab and then I throw a grenade and like then I pull out the machine gun and machine gun these two dudes. Like we want you to move like that through the game. Whereas like John Wick or The Raid, or like I'm sure I could think of other movies, but like these are movies of people. Even I guess maybe even John Wick isn't a great example, but like I feel like maybe The Raid is a better example of like these are people clashing and they are equal, not necessarily equal forces, but they are forces that push each other back and forth. And we didn't want that to be the vibe. There's a lot of like Doom Eternal is a fantastic example of like there's a real push and pull of like you hit and then you're out of ammo or you miss a shot and like then the enemy can hit you back and it pushes you back and so you have to reposition. You have to like figure out whatever your next ability you need to use is. I never quite got like the whole fire stab thing. Like I never quite gotten that rhythm, but I can see the rhythm in people who play that a lot as like this really interesting like push and pull push and pull kind of rhythm, and that's not what we wanted. We wanted like a push for like I am the one, I'm the guy, right? I'm like in Soul King, I guess I am the girl because Lynn is our primary character, but like smash and shoot and shotgun kind of thing. So yeah, we didn't want enemies that were like hyper confident. We didn't want enemies that were like circling around and like trying to flank you and stuff, because that's not what they're for. And you can call that bad AI, and it is bad AI. Like they cannot pathfind for shit at all. But that's not what we wanted in the end. That was not that wasn't the goal, I guess.
And to go back or to talk a little bit more about like the score system itself, as you're saying, like you can like hit enemies, knock them in the air, shoot them, stuff like that. Could you go a little bit more into detail about what kind of like tricks are you able to pull off in the game?
So that's something that we did not I may not have explained properly, I guess, but there's not like a verticality or any aspect like that. It's very much aiming for shoot. It's shooting in melee and like using your ability things. We have like grenades and stuff like that for abilities, as well as stuff like health refills and stamina refills and like God, I should remember these like blasts and like shotgun blasts and other melee abilities. It's not important. Um, but yeah, we really do focus on very much on like the clearing quickly enemies as targets thing. So there's not a lot of like Devil May Cry style like style points kind of thing. We don't have a focus on that at all. Your real ability to stunt on enemies is to shoot a couple and then use the taunt move to like cool, good, haha, you suck kind of thing. To like increase your multiplier there. There's not like a great like, showy kind of like special system like that, if that makes sense. So.
Okay. And to go a little bit more detail about kind of like the weapons themselves, do you have any weapons that are like unique for shooter, like or like beyond just like the pistol, shotgun, and sniper rifle archetype?
Yeah. No. Kind of. So I mean, we do have we keep to relatively standard archetypes for the primary weapons. We've got pistol. Our big departure is like we have pistol, and then we have like shotgun that goes in a pistol slot or machine gun that goes in a pistol slot. Like that's like the biggest departure I think in our primary weapons. The most notable things I would say about our like cast of weapons is that we completely cut out assault rifles. They are not a part of the game at all. Mainly for the fact that our cast is basically pistols, SMGs, rifles, and then shotguns. Those are the categories. We cut out assault rifles or any kind of automatic rifle specifically for, again, vibes-based balancing. They're just too good at everything. I think this is something that comes up in a lot of games, actually, is that in almost every situation, an assault rifle is probably not the best weapon, but it is always a sufficient weapon for whatever you're doing. So like when we early builds of the game that we had an assault rifles in, that is all anybody ever used because it's not the best in any one situation, but it will suffice in every situation. So like why would you ever need to change? And when a huge part of your game is the background reloads, the effective switching of weapons, you don't want people sticking with one weapon all the time. So we do have submachine guns, which are, as the name implies, high rate of fire but low damage. Your rifles, which are a low rate of fire but higher damage. Your shotguns spread. Each individual pellet doesn't do damage. I don't need to recite every kind of weapon there is. And then pistols, which are something that I find is very important and something that a lot of games kind of just neglect, I think, is making pistols actually a viable weapon in the situation. Our pistols in the game end up being generally a higher damage or equal damage version of a rifle, but with a shorter range and usually a higher rate of fire. And then when you move into our, we have the melee slot and the tool slot. So the tool is usually an offensive or defensive weapon that you can trigger whenever you need to, and a melee weapon is a melee weapon, right? Like it's a knife or a gun, or a knife or a punch or a kick or whatever. But like in the melee weapons, the primary focus is dealing a quick damage up close. They're not a primary weapon, of course. But in our tools, we wanted to make sure that we had interesting stuff. So we have my favorite tool personally, who's named Skeletoni. He is a skeleton who you throw him out, and all the enemies will shift their fire to Skeletoni, drawing fire off of you. It's a pretty simple thing. Later in the game, if you find a secret area, you can actually upgrade him to Skeletoni Plus, which just gives him some like cool runic like skull etchings, not tattoos, but etchings, I guess. And other things like instant weapon reloads, health pickups, temporary armor pickups, that kind of thing. But yeah, we don't have anything like super crazy creative, other than like the context being creative of like All of our guns are technically Nerf guns or foam dart blasters, to be legally distinct from Nerf. We like our grenade is a tennis ball with like a little thing in it, because it's a dream, and like we can do whatever kind of goofy things we want. So, and then we include some stuff from Alaska. What's called an uluk knife, or an ulu is how some people would say that as well, which is like a traditional Alaskan knife. It's kind of like a curved blade. That's something we include in a bunch of games too, and something that's included in Soul King as hands down the best melee weapon. Yeah. So, yeah. Does that answer the question? I think. I don't know. I feel like it's not a great answer because we don't have like the crazy cool, like a lot of boomer shooters have like really interesting weapons and like really like cool, like we have fire guns, or this gun shoots frogs, or like this sniper is also a machine gun if you change this thing, and we don't have a ton of that in Soul King, for better and for worse.
And with you mentioned earlier there are boss fights in Soul King. How does like the boss fight like change the dynamic between like the normal encounters?
Yeah, so somewhat stereotypically, it's kind of boss fight where you come into an arena and like it's an arena fight, right? Like, ha ha ha, I am the big boss, ka-chunk, all the doors close, you have to fight me now to get out. We try to make sure that it's still the same thing of, excuse me, we try to make sure, much like the normal combat, that it's the same sort of emotional rhythm of moving, firing. A lot of bosses will spawn kind of helper characters, or like little, will spawn mobs basically, as something for you to shoot and make sure you're not losing all your score and stuff. But like, yeah, they're very much okay, have you learned to move and shoot and move and shoot? Great. Okay, now in this context, have you learned to move and shoot? Okay, now I'm doing a charge attack at you. Can you move and shoot around this? It's kind of our first boss, and then we have a second boss that's more of like have you figured out how to disable, like, hit targets in the arena and stuff? Okay, hit these targets to be able to damage me. Okay, now you can shoot me a bunch. Okay, now hit these targets again, and now I've spawned enemies. And then our final boss kind of takes aspects from all the enemies and the two bosses and like combines them together into a final fight that is, I like it. I don't know. It's not the most nuanced fight in the world, but there's a lot of explosions and a lot of grunts and groans. So, yeah. But yeah, it's a very different rhythm. It's very much the boss fights. We wanted to still test the same skills that normal levels test with moving, shooting, moving through these spaces, but test them in a way that feels different to play against. And I think we mostly, not nailed it, but I think we mostly succeeded at that. Because they feel radically different from normal gameplay. But yeah, but you're still moving, you're still shooting, you're still trying to dodge weapons still trying to dodge attacks, dodge projectiles, dodge, all that kind of stuff. But now in an arena instead of a linear level. So, yeah.
All right. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about being able to upgrade weapons. So how does like weapon upgrading work? Like how does it like differentiate between them?
So yeah, so you don't necessarily upgrade weapons as far as like making my rifle 1 slightly better to a rifle, gold rifle 1, right? It's more we tried to steal some stuff from League of Legends in that I haven't played League in years now, but when I was active, okay, that's good. At least you won't call me out for not knowing the right things about League. Myself and George, who was a big help in this one, he was a big League player for years, big Counter-Strike player, which really helps when you're making a first-person shooter. Having like a not pro, but a like competed at a national level Counter-Strike player on your team is great for testing because they will find every little bug. But yeah, anyway, so back when I was playing League, the cheaper characters, or the characters that were in frequent free rotation, were simpler but effective for new players. Like a new player could get in with I don't even remember his name. He has the Sword of Damocles as one of his moves, and he spins. But it doesn't matter, can come in with get a character that is easy to use, but not necessarily going to perform at high levels, right? So like the more you learn that character, the more you learn their limitations, and that they're not actually going to take you all the way, but they're a great start. And with the weapons in Soul King, we tried to make sure we started off with weapons that were good for a new person, but like didn't have these massive pitfalls. And then as you go through the game, you unlock new weapons that have more power, but also have pitfalls, right? So you don't start off with a sniper rifle. You start off with our standard rifle, which can shoot pretty good. It's pretty accurate. It's pretty quick. It reloads pretty fast, like pretty good. Then you unlock the I think it's the high fire rifle. I don't remember what the name of it is in the game. But it's fires faster, but it takes longer to reload, and it's less accurate, right? So like, okay, you can put out a lot more damage, but if you're not watching your shots, you're gonna take more time. You're gonna lose out. And then once you've continued past that, then we get to the sniper rifle, which is huge damage, very, very accurate, but very slow to reload, and like, of course, time between shots. We do the same thing with shotgun. Your starting shotgun is pretty good at most stuff, and then you get your fast fire shotgun, and then your high damage shotgun, and like it's less of an upgrade directly, and more like we wanted to start off with a wide path, and then kind of like narrow it off as you unlock new weapons into like different specializations. So if you're a long range player, that sniper is going to be top notch. I'm not a long range player, so the sniper is basically trash for me, which is why I think it was the worst weapon. People disagree though, and the same thing for pistols, same thing for rifles, or for shotguns and submachine guns as well. So, yeah,
and
yeah.
And I guess like to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, that I want to comment on about kind of like the earlier forms of a Destiny, and kind of like that kind of difference between cover-based shooting and kind of very kind of like active shooting, I guess would be like the differentiating. Sure. Like for me, I think I'm the same way. Like, I did try Destiny 2 about like 3 months ago, like while I was writing my shooter book for the first time, and I'm also as another point, I'm replaying the original Halos too.
Oh, okay.
And like for me, I've just never been a huge fan of like cover-based shooting. I have a friend who loves Division and Division 2, and while I like them or I appreciate them, I just never got into that. Like, again, you're talking to someone who has played Doom, Ultra Kill, Dusk, like pick any boomer shooter of the last 7 years, and there's a good chance I have played it. And like to me, like I like that idea of like the constant movement, like as you were saying earlier, like comparing to like stuff like John Wick, The One, that kind of thing, like that, like you are kind of like the star of the show. Like you're not supposed to be behind on a wall. You're trying to be more engaging. I think that's kind of like, and you mentioned, of course, push forward combat earlier, and I could spend another day or two talking about push forward combat. That was kind of like the whole impetus of that kind of style. That they want you to be, or the player, to be constantly like engaged with it. Because if you're not engaged, then you're not healing, or you're not getting ammo back. And with Soul King, with like kind of like movement and motion, you've mentioned, of course, that it's not really like a vertical base movement. Like you're not going to be jumping, air dashing, stuff like that. In terms of like the general like movement of the character, like do you have stuff like a dodge dash, or is it just more like run or like walk and then like a run that like consumes stamina?
Yeah, so we this is another thing that is a break with. We have a lot of spots where we break with like what is the not standard boomer shooter thing, but like what is the accepted like right way to do a retro FPS. So we have a standard movement speed, which you can move all 4 directions, same speed. There's no penalty for moving backwards or side to side, which is not notable necessarily, but whatever. That's how I'm choosing to phrase this, I guess. And then like which is going to be your movement, your dodging speed, right? It's going to be if something's coming at you, you're going to use that to get out of the way. And then we have the sprint, which goes only forward, directly towards your crosshair, at a much greater speed, right? Which draws stamina, which is kind of our balancing factor of making sure you're not just running through every level. Which is another like not non-standard implementation for a retro FPS. It's very much trying to meld newer design with older design kind of thing, right? So a very like Call of Duty sprint kind of thing, but putting it into the context of moving and dodging projectiles and shooting enemies. We had we have some like tools and melee weapons that modify that. So like with a melee weapon, every time you use a melee weapon, you get a boost, like a lunge forward. Another thing we stole from Halo, because it just feels good. It just feels so much better to do that than having it swing in place. But we have weapons that take that to like 11. As far as the one that many people get a kick out of is the healers, which are similar but legally distinct from Heelys. And any kid that went to school in the late 2000s, early 2010s will immediately recognize Heelys as shoes with a wheel in the heel, right? That lets you roll down the like hallway faster, and then you get detention and stuff. I could never get them. My parents would never buy them for me. But yeah, so that's a melee move that just takes the lunge to like 11, and instead of going, 5, like quick step forward, it rockets you forward at like 5 or 600. Nah, not 100. I don't know. It's incredibly fast. It's at least 3 times your sprinting speed, and like you just fire forward, and anything basically between you and the end is like just blown into chunks. Which is not like movement in the like not movement tech in the particular way that you'd say of like a dodge or a roll or whatever. But I do think is like it's another element of customization of like, I don't know. Do you think it's valuable to be able to do like this massive lunge forward once or twice in a level? We have a grappling hook. Like, do you want to try and use a grappling hook for stuff? Doesn't do any damage, but it's kind of fun to use. We caution against that one when we do demos, just because everyone's like, "Oh, grappling hook, that's crazy cool," and then you use it, and like 80% of the time, players who use it, who don't know what they're doing, just like fire themselves into like 9 enemies and then just get killed instantly, because it's a thing. It's the like skill expression versus excitement thing, right? Of like grappling hooks are really cool. Melee weapons are really cool. Explosives are really cool. But like in a game like this, those are ways to like you learn those tools to be able to get higher score, to like get through this part faster or whatever. They're not like the Titanfall 2 kind of like really fun, versatile tool that you can use for everything. They're a very specific thing to do one thing faster, and like which is something you, I guess, learn from playing 1,000 hours of the game. That's not for everybody, not going to be the best tool for everybody, I guess I should say. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I forgot to ask you, to clarify in terms of like weapon loadouts and weapon stuff like that.
Yeah.
Does the player swap between weapons like in the level, or do they all kind of like equip their build before the level starts?
So yeah, before the level starts, you equip your build of whatever you want, whatever you've unlocked up to that point. You unlock all the weapons by about the halfway point of the game, excluding, of course, now the new weapons we're adding for the DLC, which you unlock in the back half of that game.
Okay.
So yeah, and you also have an opportunity a couple times in certain levels to switch out your weapons before a boss fight, because you don't. Sometimes the weapon you want for a level is not the same weapon you want for a one-on-one fight. So yeah.
All right. I'm trying to think if there's any other questions. I do want to ask you a few questions about kind of like the DLC and the post work you've done.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else regarding the gameplay or the design of Soul King you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, at this point, I feel like I've just blacked out for like the last however long we've been talking. I don't think I've kept a single memory of anything I've said. So hopefully I didn't say anything too stupid. And hopefully I didn't go on to like Gears of War for a long time, because I have a tendency to do that. It's yeah. No, I think I think you've asked good questions and intelligent questions about how things are designed and how they're put together, and hopefully I've answered those pretty well.
All right. In that case, there's a few kind of last series of questions for you, and then we'll wrap things up. So one thing I want to ask you about, you said like kind of at the start, like you started out something like a solo developer, and now you're kind of like work with a small team.
Yeah.
For like other developers listening to us, especially those who are kind of trying to start a project, or maybe they're still like kind of, dipping their toes in the game dev space. Any tips or advice you could give for like doing solo dev work?
Yeah. First, before anything else, so we started CakeNeq Games in 2014 with 2 people. It was myself and a lovely person named Kelsey, Sarah. she left the next year, and so like from there to like 2018, 2019-ish, I was solo. But that's not also it's not actually important for any of this. Next thing is that I should make the disclaimer that I've not made a game that sold like 1 million copies. I have not like found the magic key to like being successful every time I do anything. Quite the opposite. I often shoot myself in the foot repeatedly because I want to do something new and different and exciting rather than building on previous success. But as far as like moving from a solo developer into a small team, especially a small team of like people who are working on percentage or volunteer, or like they're working on some sort of spec for like, you know, back end points, if you want to use like technical terms. Creative control is a big one. I talk to a lot of people, especially a lot of new developers. Not as like a mentorship or anything, because I'm not somebody who should be mentoring anybody, but like I just talk about like, what are you doing and how are you doing it, like all that kind of stuff. And something I see a lot is that somebody will be like me, right? I'll be like, okay, I want to make X game and I want it to go just like this and this and this. And I have no money to pay anybody to work on it, but I want people to come work on it because it's a cool idea. It's great. They're going to love it. You guys should come work on it. And they're like, they want people to, I'm trying to phrase this in a way that's not like mean or anything. And it's not trying to be mean. People don't want to work, in my experience, for somebody else without getting paid for that. People love to work with other people, right? If you want to work with me, but working with somebody and working for somebody are two different things. And I see a lot of developers, especially people who have been working for like 4 or 5 years, who have like maybe released the game or something and want to move on to something bigger, basically buying into their own hype that they are a creative genius or they have fantastic ideas, and people just need to like listen to them and do what I say and it'll work out. And in my experience, that has never been true. Like the more you listen to the people you're working with, especially the people who like know what they're doing, the more they're going to give you good ideas, and you're going to have good ideas, and like people are going to challenge your bad ideas. And like the more you listen to that, the more you like give people who are working on the project control over what they are doing in the project. The more people are going to want to work with you without having cash up front or cash, every week or whatever. And also like the more people are going to be happy to work with you again next time. The more people are going to like want to continue working with you and enjoy that time and like actually finish their stuff. Because like when you're working with a team that's not getting paid up front, I think you can't fault somebody for being like, yeah, I'm just not feeling it, and like walking away. And I think that's fair, that's why like you got to give people control, like listen to people, and like not that you have to put everyone's ideas in the game, but like kind of have to kill that ego in some ways of like thinking that you're great and you're fantastic and you need to like if you have this gospel of this great game that you're going to share with the world, you have to like understand that like you don't know a lot of stuff, and that like these people are volunteering their time to work on something that they're volunteering their time to work on something that you're doing. Like you should be paying them back in like by respecting their time and respecting their like ideas and input and stuff. And then also meetings are great. It's a dumb counterintuitive thing, but like in my experience, setting like a bi-weekly meeting, just to even if it's just like a really chill, like, hey, talk about what you've been working on, talk about what we're going to work on this next week, like talk about issues you have. I find that like meeting every other week, or maybe if it's a big project every week, is like really great for keeping people engaged and keeping people like invested in your project. So I don't know. I think that's everything. I think that's all I have to say about that. I'm not like a great manager or anything. So.
And I think you made a good point about kind of the difference between working with someone and working for someone. Because, again, like, it is very easy to get into that trap that my idea is the perfect, pristine idea. And if only, I got enough money and everyone does all the art and, everything I say comes true, then my game is a success.
Right.
And, again, like, you're talking to someone who has played thousands at this point of indie games over the past 10 years. I have seen little projects, big projects, weird, fantastic ones, those that just, it felt like it was put together using like a duct tape and glue, and it still
You
works
played my
out.
games. I got it. Okay, yeah. No, yeah.
And it is very hard, I think, for a lot of people to kind of internalize why a game works and why it doesn't work. And again, you talk about yourself rambling, that's when I ramble. That's my hour to 2 hour thesis right there.
Yeah.
And it is very hard, I think, for people to kind of understand, as you said, it is a collaborative process. If you're going to have someone work with you, they have to work with you. And at the end of the day, you want to be working with people who want to keep working with you. Because you don't want to be someone who, every project completely throws everyone out. Everyone doesn't want to work with you, so I have to find 5 more people, and then another 5, and we repeat.
Yeah, and that's something that I in CakeNeq Games have had the incredible fortune to work with the same groups of people repeatedly. Usually every project we swap 1 or 2 people in or out. Not that we got to get rid of these guys, they're terrible. It's usually just a scheduling thing, or just they had a year that they had time to work on a game, now they don't. But it's great to see people who I've worked with since 2015 coming back and still being all right, what's the next game? What's the next project? But to touch on your point of games that have turned out great, games that have not, I also think it's a complicated thing to sometimes, I don't know. In my experience, sometimes shit just doesn't work out. You can have the right people doing the right thing, making a cool project, excited about it, and it's just bad. From my perspective, it's always hard to figure out because I only get to work on a game at the very most. I get to work on 1 game a year, right? For Soul King, it's been over nearly 2.5 years, which for me is 1,000 years. I want to do new project every 6 months if I had my way. I also understand that's not the healthiest thing, and that's not how people want to work. And that's good. That's good because I need people to slow me down and force me to finish my projects the real way. From my perspective, I only get to see the inside scoop of how a game goes from A to Z once a year or twice a year. I only get to do a maximum of maybe, if I am studious and have a long, healthy life, maybe 50 games in my lifetime. But even that's 50 is a pretty small sample size, right? I don't know how games don't work out or how games do work out. In that I've played games from incredibly talented people that just suck, and I've played games from, I wouldn't say untalented, but I would say people who don't. I've played games from creators who don't nothing they do works. It's all just they're misguided in what they want to do. But sometimes they just hit something and it just works, and it's great, and it's terrible because sometimes you get a game and it just you've spent 2 years in this thing and then oh, it's not very good. I think Soul King is good from my perspective. Many of the people who've played it have given us very positive reviews, which is really exciting. Because I've worked on quite a few games that were just they were a great idea, and we put the work into it, and it just fell apart in the end. And so.
Yeah. And again, I've seen games from people who have combined 20, 30 years plus in the industry that just end up failing. There's just nothing about that stands out, and it is one of the things that has really changed the market over the past decade. Has been. We really have seen this growth of more experimental and unique games, but at the same time, that still has to be tempered with who's going to play this game. Who is your market? Because if you can't answer that question, who's going to show up day one to play your game?
Absolutely, and that's something that I feel cynical often about. I want to. A couple of years back, we made the conscious choice to not just do whatever we wanted, basically. Like for years and years, I just made whatever I wanted because, like, yeah, I just make a game. Like, I don't know, you can't stop me, basically. Like, I'll do whatever I want. I'll make whatever kind of game I want. A couple years back, we made a conscious choice as a group to like focus on making commercial indie games, right? So like whether or not we have succeeded is a completely different choice or a completely different question. I would argue that our previous release provider did not succeed at that. I don't think it was like really what we wanted it to be. But even that, I mean, even that we've gotten, we were a part of the bundle for Ukraine in 2021, I think. There was itch.io put together a big like games bundle for Ukraine. We were part of that. And through that, we got distributed to thousands of players. We didn't make any money off that, which is good. We don't want to make money off of like a war thing. But yeah, through that, we got this game that I think is, in my opinion, not my best work. Like, it is not fantastically built. But even then, like, it got to people who loved it, who really enjoyed it, who played through it and like submitted bugs, because there were a bunch of bugs I didn't find in that thing. And like, yeah, so like that's the thing, like, yeah, you're 100% right. Like, if your experimentation is incredible and it's great and like something that indies are uniquely positioned to be able to do, because we don't have 500 people that have to like pay mortgage. I mean, we do have 500. Like, we have people who need to pay mortgages, but like the indie sphere does not rely on selling games to continue making things. The AAA sphere does. If a AAA game doesn't sell, that company or that company like is in trouble, if not immediately out of business, right? For me, I can not make money for like a decade, and I'm still making games because I make money somewhere else. I make money consulting. I make money, working a day job or whatever. But at the same time, like, yeah, I do see a lot of people, being part of our local game scene here. We just talk to a lot of people who are like trying to start out, and they want to make something incredible and creative and huge and unique and like with new ideas, and they want to quit their job tomorrow and like go do that full time. And it's sometimes hard to really explain that, like, you gotta, if you want to do that, if you want to quit your job, that's something you can do, but you gotta like understand what market you're going into. You gotta understand who's going to be there to play your game. And it's something that I will fully admit, I don't know, man. Like, we make games that we think are good. We try to go where we can see players are interested, or where we can see examples of other things that have worked. But like, I mean, I'm not making millions, right? Like, I can't say that from perspective of having done it. I can only say it from perspective of having failed to do it several times, right? Like, but yeah. Anyway, looping back to the original point of like, yeah, I think there's a lot of value in making stuff in genres and in spaces that people can look at and go, oh yeah, I know what that's going to play like, right? Soul King is very much if you look at it, you're like, oh, it looks like a Doom thing or a Wolfenstein thing or a whatever. And so like that comes with some pre-built level of like, I can wrap my head around that. Whereas a lot of games either intentionally like avoid saying I'm a whatever genre game, right? Like, because you want to be cooler and you want to be like above labeling yourself in that way. But also, just it's hard to find that sometimes. But I've lost the point of what I was really talking about. So I'm gonna turn it back over to you and see if there's another question that I can ramble on about.
All right, so I guess like the last question I have for you tonight, and then we'll wrap things up. As you said, you released Soul King last year, and you're working on more content for it. Could you go a little bit more detail about like kind of like what the post-release support for the game is like?
Yeah. So we with Soul King since day zero have been kind of planning to have like some post-release stuff. The amount of that stuff was entirely dependent on what the reaction to the game was, right? So we have what I call the ratcheting mechanism, right? So like we have like ratchet 0 is like the game got out, we have like a ratchet forward of like people like it, right? Click. Okay, cool. We're gonna do this little piece of content. So that was Grimzo's Gauntlet, right? People like the gameplay. Boom. We're gonna give them like a not infinite gameplay generation, but like a significantly like you can generate a bunch more gameplay. You can generate a bunch more levels. You can play these weekly gauntlets and stuff. Cool. Boom. All right. Good. People like the story. Okay. Click. Next ratcheting mechanism. That green lights our current DLC that we're working on called Out of the Box, which is a full like story, a full second story of the game, taking place after the main game wraps up. There's like a nice little side story with a very constrained cast of characters, so it's a little bit easier to generate our new art assets and stuff. But yeah, it's gonna be a free DLC available to players, anyone who owns the main game. It's like just literally, I think it's a cliche to say, but like it is literally a like thank you to the people who enjoyed our game. Like, thanks for playing, thank you for being here and supporting us. Here's a little bit more, like there you go. And then as a somewhat cynical side measure to that, we can also say, hey, our game just got like 2.5 hours longer. We can update our little like how long to beat page or whatever, and like there's extra story. And then of course, part of that we want to also like reinvigorate our sales by uploading a new DLC and updating some of our store assets to be a little more professional, which will all be hitting ideally at which will all be hitting at right about the same time as we're going to have a sale to, again, like be like, okay, hey, maybe we can hit our sales ratcheting, or our sales part of the ratcheting mechanism, which will then be the next click, which will take us into a full sequel following on from the end of the DLC. So yeah, like at this point, that's the idea is we want to build like in steps. We don't want to say like, we're doing a 3-game trilogy, right? Because like if we make the first game and no one plays it, then what's the point of making 2 more, right? Like maybe you'll make a second one that's so good that people will come back and play the first one and they'll be ready for the third one. I've seen a lot of trilogies released by newer developers or by small developers that like just spend a decade of somebody's life on a project that like doesn't go anywhere. And that's great if that's what you creatively want to do, but that's not what we want to do. We want to make engaging games that can sell as well, And so, like, yeah, that's our post-release support. Obviously, there's been a bunch of bug fixes, like bug fixing a like 4 to 6 hour, 3 to 5 hour, whatever you want to say exactly, first-person shooter with a team of like 2.5 people. Like 2 people working nearly full time, and then like 3 people working like whenever they have time. Is a huge task, and so like we miss a ton of stuff. We had a pretty rocky launch, especially performance-wise, but we've like patched a bunch of those issues out. We found a bunch of like really cool new stuff. We've like patched in some new mechanics, some new enemies now, and like entirely new maps for our gauntlet mode that expand kind of our value proposition, as if you will. But yeah, and that's kind of the plan at this point, is like we're spending another month or 2 here, like building out this more stuff, and then push it out into the wild, and we're doing an ad push and like a little refresh of our store assets, and then we'll see like, hey, if this picks up sales, then great. Like we'll start start working on the next game. If not, we've got some other, we'll move on to like doing something different. So yeah, we do have a full trilogy. I should mention. I'm not saying that like we have one game and if people like it, we'll figure out the rest. Like I have pitch documents for a full trilogy of the games, right? Like there is a 3-story arc with hooks for at least 2 other projects that we could do. But we've also constructed the story in such a way that like if we only ever get one game, it is still a reasonably satisfying story, right? Like we get that. And even if we only get 2 games, there's a reasonably satisfying ending to the second game that will like, if we never got a third, you wouldn't be like, oh, damn, we should have gotten the third one. We never saw how that story ended. It's just, a way that it can end. And of course, the most complete version is a 3-story arc. But, getting a successful trilogy is like, I don't know, winning the lottery, I think, at this point. Like,
it can be very difficult, especially again when you're trying to like start out with like a new game and there's not really much of a hype around it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, building from basically scratch, right? Like, yeah, it's fun, but yeah, So, yeah, I think that answers that question. Maybe.
All right. Well, I think with that, I'm just about out of questions, and we are about 90 minutes in, so I think we can safely start to wrap things up.
Well,
yeah, I know, it just flew by.
Time flies when you're rambling incoherently, right? Like,
all right. So, I guess as a kind of few like final questions for you, Wyatt, to end things on. So, first off, so Soul King and your games, as we said, they're all on itch, they're on Steam. Are there any plans for like console or other platform launches for them?
Yes. Yeah. No. Kind of. Again, the ratcheting mechanism is my favorite metaphor because it explains everything I do and everything I don't do. So that's another spoke on our wheel of like if we hit X sales or X response, or we're able to find a publishing partner that we liked. Consoles is like the next thing we wanted to do. We want to do Switch. We want to do Xbox. We also want to do PlayStation somewhat, but I don't own a PlayStation. So like I own a PS4, but I don't own a PS5. So like I'm not familiar with what the situation is there. But like that is something we absolutely would love to do. We did not find any publishing partners that we liked that liked us, or to say it inversely, the publishing partners that did like us were not what we wanted to partner with. We're working on putting some stuff together to basically bootstrap a new publishing arrangement. But like nothing is ever in stone until it's in stone. So like we would love to, if our DLC release and our little refresh works out, we are hopeful that we will be able to swing over onto the Switch and the Xbox and PlayStation markets. But at this point, I do not have any dates on my calendar for when that will happen or if that will happen. So the long answer is that the short answer is like, no, but we'd really like to. So buy our game, please. And then we can put it on Xbox or PlayStation, or really Switch is the big one that I want. Like everyone wants their game on Switch, right? Like it's, yeah, I don't know.
All right. So for you, anything social media wise you would like to plug? It's like Twitter, Facebook, X, whatever.
Yeah, so I have abandoned Twitter to some people's chagrin and some people's excitement. I frequent Blue Sky, though. You can find me at I'm clicking stealthily on my second screen here to see what my Blue Sky handle is. You can find me at WY477, WH173. It's Wyatt White in like elite speak kind of thing at bluesky.social. You can find CakeNeq Games. It's just CakeNeq at Blue Sky. We're also on TikTok under the same handles, Instagram under the same handles, probably Facebook under the same handles too, that we don't post there often. Or you can just go to CakeNeq.com and we have a mailing list. We try to be as available as possible. You can just join our Discord and DM me, and I will probably DM you back. Yeah. I try to be as available as I can possibly be. So if you're trying to get a hold of me and you can't, just yell really loud and I'll probably come find you. Like I like to talk about game stuff. So yeah.
All right.
It's my best, I think, plug I have for for any of that. I have a QR code I can send. I can put up a QR code right here if that works.
All right, I'll include links to the social media stuff down below for the podcast notes. So, yeah. I guess my final question for you, Wyatt, to take us out on. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans? Any final thoughts on anything that we talked about?
Yeah. So, to the fans is vague, but I'm gonna take that two different directions. One, to the fans of Soul King, that we love you and you're fantastic, and thank you for listening to this whole thing and listening to me ramble, and playing our game because we have a whole sappy like little paragraph at the end of the game when you finish the credits, like, hey, we love you and we made this for you. But specifically, there's a line in there that I like that is that a game without players is incomplete. And I think that is genuinely true. So thank you for completing my game for me. Second way to take that, for the fans of Game Wisdom, this is Game Wisdom. This isn't a separate thing, right?
Oh,
like this isn't like the podcast is connected, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I do know I do know that you are Game Wisdom man. That is true. I've been watching YouTube for a while now. But yeah, anyway, so for the Game Wisdom fans, thank you for listening to me, and please buy Soul King, because I love you. Maybe if you wait like a month, put it on a wish list and then wait a month, and then you can buy it when it's like couple bucks cheaper. I think you'll like Soul King a lot. And then for general fans of video games, I don't know, play The Club. It's an Xbox 360 PS3 game. It came out on PC, but it's like Games for Windows Live, so it's kind of broken. But find it, pirate it if you have to, and play it. It's a really good prototype, but like not a very good retail release. So yeah, cool.
All right,
that's it. I think that's all I got.
All right. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap things up for this chat. Wyatt, as always, if you are free for the future, you want to come on and talk about another game project or ramble more about game design, let me know, and I'll be happy to have you back on.
Hell yeah. I will talk at length about many topics whenever. I'm here.
All right. Well, again, thanks for reaching out, and definitely best of luck with getting the new DLC and content for Soul King out.
Thanks for having me. It's fantastic.
All right. So, for everyone watching, once again, thank you for tuning in. For my stuff, do the YouTubing, check out the Patreon, the Discord, follow me wherever. As I said at the start, if you'd like to come on and talk about your own game or just game dev in general, reach out to me any which way. And all monthly support will go towards getting more daily streaming happening. So, if you like what you see and want to see me more 7 days a week, be sure to do that. But again, thanks for watching. Come back for daily sessions on game design here and on game wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games.